the basis of all independence.
See, the Republicans weren't mostly, for the most part, were not anti-slavery for the simple fact that they were moral. Republicans were anti-slavery for the fact that they were industrialists. And industrialization of the country and the agrarianization of the country were incompatible with one another. So the industrialists wanted to dismantle the agriculturalists by any means necessary. And the way to do that is you take away their property. And who were their property? Their property was their slaves. Okay? So Lincoln even said it himself, if I can save the Union without freeing a single slave, I would. If I can save the Union with freeing some and leaving others, I would also do that. If I can save the Union with freeing all the slaves, I would also do that. Lincoln was not really all about freeing the slaves. He didn't want it to expand into the new territories that we continued to gain at that time. But he wasn't really about ending slavery. Because honestly, like, the cotton textile industry kind of helped fuel the industrialization with the textile industries in the North. Okay, so this is something you got to keep in mind here. Lincoln even said it himself. He thought blacks were inferior to whites. He believed that blacks should be exiled outside of the country. He talked about sending them off to Liberia. Lincoln talked about sending them to Haiti, Santo Domingo, British Honduras, and Panama. These were some of the countries that were on the list of countries where Lincoln wanted to send black folks. Okay, so don't get it twisted. He was not your friend. All right, African Americans fought, died, struggled to free themselves. In the early 1900s, Theodore Roosevelt, he and his Congress eventually passed the Food, Drug, and Administration Act. The FDA was introduced, and a lot of your conjure doctors, root doctors, your spiritualists, and a lot of these black communities throughout the United States were put out of a job because they weren't sanctioned under these new rules. And this is what you end up having, is people start to abandon traditional doctors or traditional medicines or traditional way of being to go into the government sanctioned medicines, which don't always have your best interest at hand. So if you can get your own land, then I think you can be independent spiritually and mentally and physically. Fast forward a little bit, in 1964, this same time when most southern white people were actually Democrats, there was a politician from Arizona by the name of Barry Goldwater. Now, Barry Goldwater was a senator who was a Republican. So Barry Goldwater, he didn't support the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So guess what happens? All these same southern states, like Georgia, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, the usual, they don't support the Democratic Party anymore. They switch over to the Republican side and vote Barry Goldwater in that election. Lyndon Johnson wins by a landslide. But in the next 4 years, these same southern states, that Cotton Kingdom belt, South Carolina, Georgia, Mississippi, the usual, they, instead of voting for the Democratic Party, now they try their shot at the Independent Party, which was a segregationist ticket. They fail once again. But then this is when in 1968 or 1972, Nixon's not using these terms such as, he's not saying the N-word in public, and he's not doing all these things, but he's using terms like law and order. We need to crack down on crime, etc., etc., etc. This is the way the Republicans were able to appeal to an America that had these anti-black sentiments at the time.
President Nixon told his special counsel, Chuck Colson, that even though he believed abortion encouraged permissiveness, it shouldn't always be out of the question.
And there are times when abortions are necessary. I know that. You know, I mean, that's cool. You have a black and a white.
Now, if you go look at Nixon's record on race, you'll see some things interesting as well. Nixon was the first one that you really start to hear coining the term the war on drugs, right? This, under his administration, you see the FBI being used to break up organizations like the Black Panthers, etc. I was also under Johnson's administration as well. The White House domestic affairs advisor to Richard Nixon, his name was John Ehrlichman. He stated, Nixon White House had two enemies, the anti-war left and black people. We couldn't make it illegal to be either against the war or blacks. But by getting the public to associate hippies with marijuana and blacks with heroin and criminalizing both heavily, we could disrupt those communities. This is what he said about the president. And this is what the president was saying, the Republican president was saying behind closed doors. So after this time period, you have the war on drugs going as far back as 1971. You have the creation of the SWAT teams in the 1960s, the ATF in 1972. Right? SWAT stands for Special Weapons and Tactics. ATF, alcohol, tobacco, and firearms. Then by 1981, with the election of Ronald Reagan, you start to have the Military Cooperation with Law Enforcement Act, MCLEA, where they're basically local police officers are getting training and getting weaponry and getting all these things from the military. The regular civilian population are being treated like a foreign enemy.
I will tell you, Director Deutsch, as a former Los Angeles police narcotics detective, that the agency has dealt drugs throughout this country for a long time. Director Deutsch, I will refer you to three specific agency operations known as Amadeus, Pegasus, and Watchtower. I have Watchtower documents heavily redacted by the agency. I was personally exposed to CIA operations and recruited by CIA personnel who attempted to recruit me in the late 70s to become involved in protecting agency drug operations in this country. I have been trying to get this out for 18 years, and I have the evidence. My question for you is very specific, sir. If, in the course of the IG's investigations and Fred Hitz's work, you come across evidence of severely criminal activity,
let him speak into
and it's classified, will you use that classification to hide the criminal activity, or will you tell the American people the truth?
You have the militarization of the police. You have what they call no-knock raids, right? All these things go against our amendment rights, the Fourth Amendment rights, the right not to have your things searched and have your things taken without any due process under the law or without any search warrant. You have what they call civil asset forfeiture, which is a crime in itself. Civil asset forfeiture basically says that if police suspect that the things that you have on your person are associated with drugs in any way, then they can confiscate those things. They can confiscate the money, they can confiscate your jewelry, your car, your house, everything with civil asset forfeiture. Now the logic behind this is that they're thinking that, well, drug dealers have a lot of power within their neighborhoods and they can easily pay off people to keep them silent, to keep them hidden or whatever. But the civil asset forfeiture is supposed to weaken that drug dealer's power in order to do those kinds of things. So civil asset forfeiture, under the guise that they're looking out for the community, it's designed to weaken the drug dealer in that sense. But what the civil asset forfeiture ends up really doing is it creates a pillaging kind of police force in which officers can go and knock down people's doors if they suspect the person of selling drugs, take everything associated with it, and then have no type of recourse under the law, because once those things are confiscated and taken, civil asset forfeiture means you have no right to get those things back. This goes against all of the Bill of Rights in the Constitution. These things were imposed by Republicans.
Land is the basis of all independence.